Hello! In this clip from our Just Do webinar, Andy Brownstein and Mark Halpert, LinkedIn experts, will share with you the final takeaways of the effective use of LinkedIn for attorneys and law firms' posts. If you want to see more Just Do videos on law practice and legal marketing, be sure to subscribe to our channel.
Thanks very much. All right, so a couple of takeaways here from me and then from Andy. So new material, great. Curate the material that you're reading that you think is important to share with others from your experience. Old material, as Andy mentioned, is great to repurpose because if it's lifelong, it's always worth taking out, shining it up a little bit. Write it so well that people will want to comment, will want to share, and will want to know more about you. Because all they have to do is click on your name and they go right to your LinkedIn profile. And that's where they fall in the like with you, as I was telling you. That's the like part. Again, color, graphics, video, audio, all that stuff, really important. It really helps. It makes people want to read it. It makes them want to understand it. Be sure that you have the rights to use that picture, or you can cite the source of that picture. Amplify your voice. From your experience, tell people you know what you're talking about. Now demonstrate it by what you've said. And often you need to ask people to get on the conversation with you. So encourage the conversation. Again, I said earlier, if something just falls flat, then go a couple of more days or a week later and say, in case you missed it, I posted about this. And today it's even more important because here's what we know today that we didn't know 5 days ago. And make that the new twist on something you believe, something you feel, something you want people to know about that they don't necessarily know what you want them to do. So again, tell us or we'll never know. Your opportunity is to differentiate yourself on your profile while your credentials. But your real greatest opportunity is to differentiate yourself in your thought leadership. And this is where you have your opportunity to be a thought leader amongst all the people that you either are collegial with or are competing against. And often those lines blur. You want to be memorable. You want to be referable. Andy, do you?
Yeah, without repeating anything that Mark said, I think, again, it's important to show your expertise. It is important to be an expert, but much more important, as the second bullet there says, to tell people why these things are important rather than just what's important. As I said earlier, sort of the conventional wisdom speaks for itself. It doesn't need repeating. What is useful and what is relevant and what is meaningful to people is making people think about conventional wisdom differently or a non-standard viewpoint. That is being interesting, right? Being interesting is incredibly important. I would hope that after spending 45 minutes or 50 minutes with me and Mark, now that we're now people you'd want to grab coffee or a beer with, right? It's the same thing in your LinkedIn posts. You want people to walk away going, he's an interesting guy. I wonder what he's really like, right? I mean, is he just like he taught? Is his voice in person the same as his voice in writing? What kind of person is he going to be? And again, if you've done a good balance of creating some expertise in your profile and your posts, and you've got a good job of creating conversation in your posts, then you sort of hit the sweet spot of what is going to make people remember you and reach out to you when the time comes.
So I think that takes us to the end. So we'll get some questions, I hope.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Mark and Andy, for your presentation. We can now move on to audience questions. Just a friendly reminder for our participants, if you have a question for Mark and Andy, please feel free to click that Q&A button at the control panel at the bottom of your screen and submit your questions. Looks like we already have a couple here, so you can go ahead and get started with those. Our first question is, can you give us some examples of how posting on LinkedIn has positively impacted your practice's visibility?
I can. So you saw a couple posts, I think maybe just one post that we used today about something that's relevant to the startup world. It's about 2 years ago. I have a neighbor. He's not a client, though he is a business person. Kids went to school together. Our kids went to school together, high school together. And I ran into him and he goes, I gave your name to somebody. I read one of your posts and this guy was telling me that for a variety of reasons, he's got a startup and he had counsel, and counsel left the firm and went to a new firm, and the new firm wouldn't let him bring the business over because his rates changed and it was too cheap or whatever it was. and he had to get rid. He just said, now I need somebody new. And I saw your post, and it reminded me that you do a lot of this work. So I gave him your name, and it turned into a client. And now he's been a client for a couple of years. This friend of a friend who I didn't know, and even the friend wasn't a client; he just knew me.
Yeah, a colleague of mine who's a LinkedIn coach had seen me writing about working with law firms, and she got a lead to go help a law firm, pretty good sized firm here in Connecticut. And she said, I can't do this. I'm going to give it to Mark because I saw he posted on it. And that was my largest client for that year. So these are not made up stories. These are real things that happen. Now, is it going to happen every day? No. Is it luck? Probably it's finesse more than luck because you need to be memorable.
I mean, sometimes we talk about this in the sort of old school way of marketing yourself, whether it's advertising or going to a conference or a trade show. We debate internally at the firm, well, should we do this or should we not do this? Or it's going to cost us $2,000 or whatever to do this thing. And sort of the sort of pat response is, well, all it takes is one new client, right? And you've gotten your return on investment, or an existing client sends you more work than they might have otherwise sent you. Whereas even if you put an hourly rate on the time you invested in writing all your posts and added it all up over the course of a year, again, if you got like one or two more clients a year, that it pays for itself. If you want to look at it as sort of cold hard dollars.
Yeah, I had a
more than pays for itself for sure. I mean, this one client I've paid, I've been able to build, we've had a lot of billable work from him. And so it's been a real return on investment.
I had a prospect take me apart. He wanted to know what exactly is the return on investment on LinkedIn. I mean, it's not a calculation. You don't know. And I have no control over what he says on LinkedIn. So it's all about what you say.
Right. But it's no different than saying, what's the return on investment on writing ads in your local lawyer? What's the return on investment on going to that conference?
But he did call me 6 months later, and he did say, I got my first client on LinkedIn, and let me tell you how I appreciate what you taught me. That makes me happy because I turned another person's head around a little bit.
And in fact, I mean, the argument for posting on LinkedIn is that we need to get to the next question, but right, you're 100% in control of it, right? You go to a trade show, you go to a conference, you don't know who's going to be there. You don't know who's going to you're going to run into. But on LinkedIn, while you may not know who's going to comment on your post, you can control what you want to say all the time.
So thank you, guys. Our next question is, social media gets overwhelming for me to manage. Why should I just stick to LinkedIn, or should I, depending on my practice areas, use other platforms too?
I'll let Mark start here for sure.
That's a good question. I get a lot. And so it all depends upon who your clientele is. If your clientele is a corporate community, Facebook is not where you want to be. If your clientele is the consumer community, Facebook is where you want to be, as well as LinkedIn, because you are a business person catering to the consumer world. But if you're strictly in B2B, or if you're in e-commerce, or if you're in something like that, you want to be on top of where 950 million people are at the global water cooler of the world. And if you want to learn what's going on in other countries and you want to bring those ideas back to your business in the US, it's another place to be on LinkedIn. You're never going to get that on other social media that's going to tie right to your business.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, I have seen there's been some really good posters who are on Instagram and TikTok doing reels and TikToks who are consumer-based people, like a guy who does like traffic work, and he posts about how to deal with like a traffic ticket or, what to do if the cops pull you over. They're fantastic. But, if 100%.
I wouldn't have to know that.
If you're B2B, stay on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I wouldn't have to care about traffic tickets, but I will say that if you're looking for the social media with the highest net worth per capita, it is LinkedIn.
Our last question is going to be, I see some of my colleagues use LinkedIn to post personal updates. Do you think it's beneficial to show more of your personal life or your professional life, or should we do a combination?
The pendulum is swinging to the personal side recently, very recently, especially after we've come out of the pandemic, because we all had the same situation in the pandemic. So it sort of brought us to a critical mass, a critical place where we really began to look inward. We began to appreciate our home life, our family life. Andy was talking about that a bit. Again, I said earlier, if you had serious illness in your family, please do not tell us all of the details about how many times you went to the hospital and all your lab tests and all that. That is just beyond, and I get it, that people need to get it off their chest. It's just not the place. But if you're going to do it on LinkedIn, do it with a story and a moral that we can all apply uniformly. That makes it universal.
Yeah, I do it on a very limited basis, and I would echo those points. So I try to use it to tell a transitional story to something that is beyond just the personal piece, and I'll just leave it there. I don't know if you have another question. There's one in the Q&A that I think is really relevant with like the 1 minute we might have left. Mark, somebody asked in the Q&A whether, and I'll let you answer, whether you think pro memberships are worthwhile.
Oh boy, it's a really good question right now. The professional membership, the subscription memberships are valuable if you're going to do a lot of research or you are a pretty big researcher on LinkedIn. For my 13 years as a LinkedIn coach, I have only been a subscriber twice, and that was when I was doing really large projects for my clients. I have always managed a different way to do it. This is my way of saying you don't need to pay for it. Now, let me just tell you, as of Monday, this past Monday, everybody who has a standard non-subscription membership is limited to only 10 invitations to connect to you per month. And that is changing my thought process about whether I want to get a subscription, because I ask a lot more than 10 people a month to join me on LinkedIn. So I'm going to sit back a little bit and let's see what's happened before I make a knee-jerk reaction. But nonetheless, it's all up to, it depends on what you're doing. If you're in the recruiter world, you definitely need a recruiting subject, product. If you are a salesperson and sales is your primary function, the sales navigator is essential for you. But if you are doing something on the periphery of all that, and it's probably a viable business, and you've gotten along this long without it, without really feeling hogtied, except for what I just told you, you're okay. But I think it's shifting a little bit.
Yeah, I've never, I had it once for a month or two and dropped it. I've never found it to be necessary for what I do.
And word to the wise folks, do not join it for the annual membership, because if your function changes and you suddenly don't need it anymore, there are no refunds, and you've just laid down about $1,000 that you don't get back. I don't work for LinkedIn. I say whatever I want, as you can tell. But nonetheless, I think that I'm going to probably end up being a subscriber.
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy it, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more law practice and legal marketing videos. See you in our next clip.